When I was a high school student, craft was not really something one knew much about. It would have been in the 60s, early 60s. So I never even considered it until my senior year, my fourth year at college. And I had been in architecture. And a good buddy of mine had dropped out the year before, and he used to come up at like 3 in the morning when we were all like sweating and struggling with these stupid pieces of cardboard. And he would have these neat little things that he was making, and I had no idea what they were or how he made them. I just knew I wanted to make some myself. So I transferred into jewelry. He was a jewelry major, so I transferred him at the beginning of my senior year at college. And it turned out, it was a very foolish decision, but it turned out to be the right decision. I took to it like a duck to water. In the United States, once you've received the BFA in a craft medium, it was already fairly well established at the time. There's a kind of natural trajectory. You go get the MFA, then you go get the temporary teaching job, and then you get the tenure track job. I did all of that. I followed a regular kind of path, a little irregularly, shall we say. It took longer than most people to get through it, but yeah, I went the kind of standard path. And I eventually left it when I quit the full-time teaching job in 1991. Well, the work that's going to be here is the kind of work I've been doing for the last 9 years. It's not driven, it's not conspicuously conceptual. It's not driven by the backstory, so to speak. So it wouldn't be recognizably conceptual art in any sense, which a lot of young craftspeople are interested in. But it is a kind of investigation into the nature of jewelry and what that means and what it could mean in contemporary society. So I've done a lot of looking into the ancient sources of jewelry, which is very, very old, actually more than 100,000 years. So when you have humans doing the same thing for 100,000 years, it kind of acquires these layers of meaning that we all kind of get without really thinking about it. And we all understand that jewelry is intended to make people look better. We all understand that jewelry is an important aspect of display, social position, for instance, of where we stand relative to the larger society, like an engagement ring. We all get that. And my contention would be that it's actually genetic. It's been with us so long, almost as long as language. So I am very much interested in that, and I'm not so compelled to make it into an avant-garde, art statement. I'm very much more interested in making jewelry that's kind of about jewelry in a way, and where it's been, and how people use it, and what it is today, and how that interfaces to what it was, 15,000 years ago. Which makes me not a modern, not a typical modernist artist. So that's kind of, in the broadest sense, that's the subject. So I tend to use images that have a foot in history, sometimes ancient history, leaves, flowers, fruits, nuts, that kind of stuff that have been just with us forever, along with a way of rendering these images in a contemporary way, which is kind of cartoon-like. So by taking those two disparate elements and kind of smushing together, hoping I'm doing something contemporary and recognizably of this time and not that time. I like to have people wear these things because I don't think they're truly complete without being on the body and circulating in social space. But, in the end, I make them for myself. Tell the truth. I make them because I find the whole thing fascinating, not because I'm trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes. The process is slow. I do a lot of sketches, so these are actually taken from my sketchbook, blown up and projected on the wall. So I do, whole sketchbooks full of those little kind of drawings. And then after I go through the sketchbooks, I start thinking about which ones of them are something I can fabricate or something I can carve out of wood, and then I'll start doing that. I'll basically make a number of elements without thinking about the overarching design or what they're actually going to turn into. And then I start arranging them on a table. Some want to be kind of clumps, and those turn into brooches, and some want to be circles, and they turn into necklaces. Then there's a long process of adjusting, kind of filling gaps, and then painting, and then doing the mechanics. So even a necklace like that one, that can actually take several years, start to finish. And there's a lot of dust gathering involved. These days, mostly wood, mostly maple. So all the colored elements that you see, the painted elements are maple. But also anything that comes to hand, really, that's going to be durable enough to make it into a piece of jewelry. So there's some metal, plastic, what else will I use? Different kinds of wood. I'll use boxwood, I'll use holly, which is a gorgeous white color. I'll use resins. And found objects on occasion as well. Any of that. It's not. I don't really care what the material is. I care what the image is. It turns out that Venus is in some ways, or Aphrodite is the mythical sponsor of jewelry, so to speak. There were actually two major conceptions of Venus. One was Venus Coelestis, which was the sacred Venus. Who had to do with pure love, love untrammeled by worldly concerns like being horny. And she was always represented historically as a nude because the nakedness was an analog to her purity. I mean, it's a very different way of thinking about things. And then there was another Venus, or actually another aspect of Venus, Venus Vulgaris, who was the Venus of sex, the Venus who get down and dirty. And Venus Vulgaris was always represented adorned, with fine clothing and jewelry. So in the Greek and Roman imagination, jewelry and sex were always conflated, which I find really interesting. I mean, in modern culture, we tend to kind of shy away from direct, discussions about the connection between jewelry and sex, and yet it's always there. You can't escape it. We just pretend that it's not. So this show is in part my investigation into the old relationship between jewelry and sex. If I knew then what I knew now, I don't think I'd do anything different. The path I took is virtually taking a vow of poverty. I mean, I'm barely middle class. I can't afford a new car. But, that's the choice I made, so it doesn't particularly bother me. In craft, you can make certain choices towards, accommodating the marketplace, and in jewelry, you can use gold and diamonds, and you can actually do very well if you want, and if you can make those adjustments. They're not things that I care about. What's happening today, and I think it's international, is that there's a very different taste. The people who are under 30 have a very different way of looking at things than my generation did. And some of those generational attitudes toward the visual, the conceptual, are actually really interesting. And I think that I'm already seeing it, this sort of shift in taste and how people approach making and how people approach the visual. The last such extreme shift was in the 60s. And back in the 60s, all the old farts would get all upset and say, it's not worthy. So, I mean, the same thing's happening now, but the shift in taste is going on, and it's really interesting, and it is actually supported by the same people who are making these things, the people who are under 30, who don't have a lot of money, but they're interested. So all these odd little things, knit pink robots and little hats and silkscreen T-shirts and all that are pieces of the new sensibility. And a number of kids are making a living doing that right now. I don't know if it'll last. A lot of hippies made, jewelry and, God, whatever they made back then for like 5 years, and then discovered it was actually more difficult than they thought, and then quit. So we'll see if that happens. But no, it's a completely viable way to get through life.